Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW. Today we're back with another Star Wars theory. Before we go any further though, check out the Discord down below and subscribe for a chance to win a free lightsaber. One other thing, this is one of the hardest videos I've ever made. This is a very complex story, and I honestly believe that there could be a mini-series made out of this, so if you really like the story, let me know down below, and at some point in the future we could come back to this and create a mini-series out of this. This is really an interesting story, and I really enjoyed where this went. It was a lot of fun to make, and there's new characters that I came up with in this story. I think you guys will really enjoy this and enjoy where the direction of the story goes. I'm very prideful of this work, so I really hope you guys enjoy this. So slap that like button, share it, and let's get straight into this absolutely massive theory that I've conjured up here. Today we'll be taking a different direction, a direction we've never really explored. This is a time travel story in our beloved galaxy far, far away. We're going to go all out for this one, taking and pulling from both Legends and canon material, and our theory starts a month before the Battle of Geonosis. Our story begins as a massive fleet emerges in deep space, several large destroyers, capital ships, and within them massive armies. At the head of all these, there are Sith Lords. They don't know where they are. All they knew is that there was something off about what had just transpired. Something was awry in the Force. It was possible that they had traveled into the future, but how? They didn't even have proper coordinates for where they were. There were multiple Sith Lords, some of which we're familiar with, such as the Sith Triumvirate, Revan, Bastilla and Melech, Malgus, Bane. They were here. The most powerful Sith throughout the course of history were gathered through some sort of coincidence. There were high tensions between the Sith Lords. They were so powerful and even some very hungry. A civil war could break out instantaneously. Though, if the Sith were able to maintain their composure for more than 2 minutes, they could possibly take over the Republic. For all they knew, the Jedi were still at the helm of power in the galaxy, sitting at that temple of theirs on Coruscant, sitting idly believing that there was nothing wrong with the universe. And though this was an assumption, it were true. Millions of light years away, the Jedi sat in their temple, unaware of what had just arrived in deep space. Their ignorance shown 10 years ago when the Sith returned and killed Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, though it was quickly solved by the vibrant Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi was now a Jedi Master to Anakin Skywalker. Grand Master Yoda sat in the council chamber silently, as the council was having one of its common discussions. Yoda was like Plo Koon, quiet, and only speaking when it really was necessary. But Yoda was especially focused because there was darkness covering the galaxy. It suddenly appeared from nowhere when the darkness that had been rising ever so slowly throughout Yoda's life was nothing compared to the brute force that was this evil that had just arrived in the Force. Slowly the Jedi Masters and the High Council began to take notice of the extremely dark presence in the Force. Though it wasn't just the Jedi who picked up on this massive disturbance within the Force, this shock that was ever so present in the Force sent Palpatine into not just a bewilderment but panic. This dark side energy was much more than he and Plagueis ever emitted, and though Palpatine knew of his plans for the Clone Wars, which was about to transpire, this wasn't that. Palpatine immediately called his apprentice via hologram, and he saw the fear on his apprentice's face. Palpatine discussed what it could have been. He knew of an ancient Sith prophecy that told the return of the Sith's most powerful warriors. The legend was known even by Sidious's dark adversary, Mother Talzin. They both never thought the day would come that the Sith Empire would return, but Palpatine had two plans for this, and he made sure that he would relay both of them to his apprentice. The first plan was what Palpatine was preparing to do immediately. The second plan was if he wasn't able to succeed in the first plan. Dooku agreed to what his master was preparing to do, and so the plan was set in motion by Darth Sidious. He prepared to leave his offices on Coruscant, but before he left, he was confronted by members of the High Council. Shaak Ti, Plo Koon, Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Mace Windu all arrived into his office. Palpatine was befuddled. He was completely caught off guard by their presence as well. In fact, the return of the Sith Empire was throwing off any balance in the universe. Palpatine was the most impacted by this. Because of the Sith's return, he was no longer the dominant force of darkness in the galaxy, and so he was facing trouble controlling the dark side so easily. It was like he was fighting for control. It was a first in his life. Palpatine had always been more destined to be more powerful than Plagueis, and even Plagueis knew this. He wanted his apprentice to grow more powerful than him anyways, but Palpatine, being so arrogant with his power, never expected the Force to be filled with such evil, such competition. When the Jedi walked in, Palpatine sat back down at his seat and asked why they were here. Of course Palpatine knew, but he had to play dumb. He was extremely bothered too, because he knew the Jedi would feel the ever so prominent darkness. Palpatine wanted to scream at them and tell them that the Sith had returned, but that was an undertaking he had to commit to his own. The meeting dragged on for some time, and Palpatine was losing his patience, and while he was losing his patience, he began to lose focus on his concealment. Not all of it, but one of his eyes began to glow with yellow. Though the Jedi didn't point it out, they thought it to be awfully peculiar that the Chancellor all of a sudden was showing yellow eyes, eyes of the Sith. They let him leave because he was urgently requesting to leave the Senate building on some personal business, but when the group of Jedi separated from the Chancellor, and the Chancellor who left on the shuttle, both parties knew something was awry. The Jedi now believed firmly that Palpatine were the Sith Lord, and causation of evil in the galaxy. Windu and Mundi were acting belligerent to this. They were upset that they hadn't done anything while they were with the Chancellor, and it was only that the other Masters were to remind them to trust in the Force, to trust in what the Force could do. Yoda reminded the Jedi with him to be patient and follow the path forward, and it would reveal itself as they followed it. Weeks would pass, and darkness grew closer and closer. The Chancellor hadn't been seen during that same duration. His personal business was beginning to worry members of the Senate. Masameda reassured the Senate that all would be okay and continue to be normal operations of the Galactic Republic. By this time, it were the beginning of Attack of the Clones, where our timeline picks up. Palpatine grows ever so tired as he has searched for an entire month trying to find the surge of darkness in the galaxy. He still couldn't find its source, but he decided he would try the Outer Rim, especially because the main producer of his droid foundries were present out there. It wouldn't be long before he came across a massive fleet. Massive battleships, cruisers, and fighters surrounded Palpatine's shuttle. And so, he prepared himself. The Sith Empire during this time have barely kept balance in between their ranks. With the egos of Sith such as Malgus and Revan, the tensions on board the command vessel was very high. When Palpatine arrived on board the ship, he exited with a robe held over his head and a frown melting his face down to the depths of Korriban. Palpatine, after all of his life planning to overthrow the galaxy, was ready to kill the Sith Legends of the past. He was greeted by acolytes who immediately picked up the raw power of the Dark Lord, and they backed away. As he continued walking towards the command bridge, he saw the ancient Sith Lords whose statues filled the temples of Korriban. Palpatine was slightly in awe, but more than that, he was excited. He can control the galaxy with Sith like this. And sure, he believed the rule of two, but seeing as Darth Bane was subservient to several Sith Lords around, Palpatine no longer felt it necessary to follow the rule of a disciple. The Sith Lords greeted Palpatine. It was the nicest greeting a Sith could give. It wasn't full of lightning or a lightsaber through the jaw. The Sith knew that Palpatine was the true Sith Lord of their time. They didn't know much else about him, other than the presence of him was that of a true Sith Lord. They respected him, but they didn't mean to be pushovers for him. Palpatine introduced himself as Sidious and told the Sith Lords that he was the sole leader of the Sith. A few of the Sith smirked, while a few others crossed their arms. They had found peace, with tension, but peace aboard the ship. They were all dedicated to wiping out the Jedi, but Palpatine's presence disrupted the balance on board the ship. Lord Sion stepped forward and glared at Palpatine. Sidious's frown grew into an evil, sinister grin. He knew of Sion, but he also knew of the Triumvirate. If Sion attacked, Traya and the Lord of Hunger wouldn't be far behind. And so Palpatine pushed further by saying that he wanted to lead the Sith into victory against the Jedi, which caught the attention of Revan, whose already crossed arms grew tighter. Malak and Bastila flanked him. Palpatine didn't intend for this, but he was pissing off the entire established leadership. Why not push further? He was a powerful Sith Lord. Some might even consider him the most powerful in all of the Sith history. Maybe his arrogance was getting the best of him, but he wanted to prove his power to those whom he looked up to. Sidious then rang out the words of challenge. He challenged the ship's bridge for leadership, and before an epic battle could commence, Palpatine was electrocuted. Malgus stepped out from behind Palpatine and was lowering the tension. He had some acolytes place him in some cuffs, and Palpatine wouldn't be killed. He was too necessary for that. They didn't want him causing any more tension within the Sith ranks. The Sith found their inner balance by sectioning off pieces of the galaxy for each respective Sith Lord, and yes, even to the ever-so-arrogant Palpatine, who would be gifted a share of the galaxy for his cooperation. The Sith kept Palpatine held captive on board of the command deck, so that they could keep a close eye on him. At this point, the Sith were in the Outer Rim, just outside of a planet that they didn't know about. It was golden orange with a ring around it. But in moments, a large fleet emerged from hyperspace. Palpatine knew what it was immediately. The Republic was invading Geonosis. Sidious told the Sith Lords that his plan was coming to action. There would be no peace in the galaxy as the Clone Wars were beginning. Though the idea to plunge the galaxy into war was creative, this Sith Lord didn't care for it. They didn't care for the approach. It meant that now they had to fight an army to get to the Jedi, and so they disapproved of Palpatine's actions. They believed that with the army they already had, that they would be able to do a fine job without Palpatine or his droid or clone armies. Before the Battle of Geonosis could come to an end, as the Separatists retreated from the planet, the fleet of Lucrehawks were ambushed by the Sith Empire. The Lucrehawks were old, from the times of the High Republic, but they packed a punch, and so they got into fierce combat with the ancient Sith ships. But before either side could appear to have a significant advantage, a clone armada was seen approaching the battle. On board, the Jedi who had just claimed victory on Geonosis had a bigger issue. The ancient Sith appeared to have returned. The Sith Fleet was the most capable fleet out of the three in this epic confrontation. Unlike the fleeing Separatists and the attacking Republic, the Sith military was established and in the perfect position to create a desolation of both fleets. And with the little tactical ability the Jedi had, they fled the combat zone. The casualties they faced on the ground were enough for one war, let alone a single battle. As the Sith and Separatists interlocked in combat, it were clear to Count Dooku, who had boarded one of the Separatist Lucrehawks while he was fleeing, that the Separatists needed to leave the battle zone. They were outmatched by the superior Sith armada. And so, not soon after their clone retreat, the Separatists left the planet. This was the worst decision for either side, because it emboldened the Sith morale, and now they knew that there was no force in the galaxy that could stop them. The Jedi returned to Coruscant and prepared for the worst. They knew of the legends when the Sith invaded Coruscant and captured the city world from the Jedi for so long. They prepared for the possibility of losing to the Sith and going into hiding to allow the Sith to kill themselves off through inner fighting. Though a sound strategy for the Jedi, it was the last possible decision they could take in order to keep the galaxy safe from Sith rule. As for the Separatists, they still wanted to take over the Republic and kick Palpatine out of office. The Sith provided a new enemy for the droid armies, and Dooku had to fulfill his new mission that he was given to him by Palpatine himself. But since he hadn't heard from Sidious in so long, he was prepared to skew plans into what would fit his own model of the galaxy. Though it would be increasingly difficult to side with either the Republic or the Sith, especially after the Separatists' large defeat at Geonosis, both on the ground and in space. The Republic stationed the largest fleet they could gather outside of Coruscant, mostly clone vessels with a couple ships that the Republic itself already had. The fleet above Coruscant could be struck at any moment, and so it was. The massive Sith Empire fleet emerged from hyperspace. Clone warships went into action immediately. The Sith ships, though outdated, were made for combat and conquering. The Republic light frigates and carriers like Arquentences and Acclamators were struggling against these warships. The very few Venator-class Star Destroyers were holding their own against the Sith fleet. But as Republic vessels began crumbling under the firestorm, Jedi starfighters were giving aid to the fleet above. Meanwhile, on the surface, Jocasta Sanu and a few other Jedi escorted the younglings and Padawans off-world to a secret location. There were thousands of clones stationed in and around the Jedi Temple. The Jedi needed their best fighters present in this battle. The temple was filled with Jedi Masters and Knights. Anakin was in the medical bay preparing himself with a replacement hand. He hadn't had the chance to marry Padme, but he promised her that they would marry after the Battle of Coruscant was over. The Venators over Coruscant were taking down Sith Imperial flagships, but the capital ship of the fleet was gone. It had vanished, and no one had any idea where it had gone. And while the Clone Armada was steadying its defense after losing many of its support ships, a dark shadow cast itself across Coruscant. Before any acknowledgement of this casted shadow, fire rang out across the entire city. A massive explosion covered the skies of Coruscant, blocking out the sun. The Jedi from their steps looked out across the city and saw the Senate building obliterated by bombardment. Senators from across the galaxy were dead within moments, and the Sith came. Shuttles rained down from the sky on the Jedi Temple. Clone troopers in front of the Jedi Temple began to open fire. Heavy flak began to engulf the sky. And though a few shuttles were shot down, the Sith landed at the base of the Jedi Temple. Running up to the top of the temple, acolytes and warriors engaged with the Jedi in a colossal battle that was reminiscent of the past. Clone troopers took advantage of the high ground and began to shoot down on the Sith troopers and clankers as they approached the Jedi Temple. The clones were leagues superior than the Republic troopers of the Old Republic, and even more so than the troopers of the evil Sith Empire. Though the clones were winning, the Sith warriors began to cut through the clones and Jedi alike. The Jedi had been safe for too long, they hadn't seen warriors, and of course they were bound to fail. But within the desolate landscape that was becoming the steps of the Jedi Temple, High Council members arrived and warriors began to fall. Masters Shaak Ti and Ki-Adi-Mundi got into extreme combat, while Plo Koon and Mace Windu fought side by side, cutting down warriors of the past. While the council members were causing the ruckus in the middle of the Sith advance, they mirrored a rock in the river. A few Sith fought them, while the main group of the Sith army were pushing their way into the Jedi Temple, where they would be met by the remaining council members and Master Yoda. The remaining members and knights were in here. The duo of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker were fighting back to back after their devastating loss to Dooku on Geonosis. Clone troopers from the walkway overseeing the entrance began to fire down on the Sith Empire, clipping several Sith and even more Sith troopers. The few Jedi Masters from the front steps fought their way back inside of the temple. As they returned, darkness devoured the force around them. Ki-Adi-Mundi was pulled back as a clearance was made in the combat. Lord Malgus held Ki-Adi-Mundi's neck in his hand and held him down to the ground as he cut through the Jedi Master's body. He started talking about the return of the Sith and the foolishness of the Jedi. No matter, the other Sith Lords appeared in the sea of warriors. Before anyone could do anything, several respected Masters began to get executed. None as badly as Jedi Master Luminar Unduli, who was yanked by the Force and drained by the Lord of Hunger, and before he devoured her Force essence, he broke her neck with his hands. The battle continued as the Jedi struggled. Malgus was tired of the clones creating a disadvantage for the Sith, and with a swift throw of a lightsaber, he cut down the pillars that kept the walkway up, and as it crumbled, Jedi and clones alike were crushed. Plo Koon engaged Malgus and pushed him back, while Windu took on Revan in one-on-one combat. Yoda took on Lord Traya in fierce combat, while Nihilus, Sion, and Bane went on a killing spree as Jedi tried to save one another. In a heroic move, Kenobi took a blade to the gut from Nihilus to protect his Padawan. Shaak Ti, who was nearby, saw the act and jumped in front to fend off Sion. These matches were evenly matched, but the Jedi around the temple were being slaughtered, as were the clones. Yoda told the Jedi that remained alive to escape, Anakin carrying his dying master away as Shaak Ti defended him from Sion. Kit Fisto, Eth Koth, and Mace Windu all held the final line of defense for Jedi escaping. The clones, the few who were still alive, stood behind the three Jedi holding the line, firing at the Sith. Not long after Yoda gave the order, the Jedi were escaping the temple via gunships heading towards a singular Venator-class Star Destroyer on the other side of the planet that awaited for them. The three Masters waited for Grand Master Yoda. He turned and looked at them and nodded, before using all of his Force might to use Force Push and send the Sith across the room, into the walls, snapping backs and cracking necks. Yoda fell to the ground. As Mace tried to grab the Grand Master, Yoda used the last little bit of force he had to push Mace back into the arms of Koth and Fisto. Malgus smiled and scoffed at the Jedi for being so pure of heart before stabbing Yoda in the back, ending the 800-year-old's life. Clones fled out in front of the last three Jedi, who ran out the door. They were the last to leave the ship and escape into hyperspace. Much like the fleet on the other side of the planet, they were in full retreat after losing to the Sith Armada. Both ground and space forces for the Sith and the Republic were severely depleted. The Jedi were going to an ancient world where the Sith wouldn't think to find the Jedi. It was a location of the first Jedi, a place that they would call home until the time were right. The clones that retreated with the Jedi were still warriors, and they still had to fight a war. The Republic was losing ground, and the clones who survived both the initial battles of Geonosis and Coruscant were battle-hardened more than anything. Whether it be clankers or the average Crimson Blade wielding psycho, the war had just begun, and it was a real bloody war. On the planet Ahch-To, Jedi Master Obi-Wan, who was carried out of the temple, was laid to rest. He died saving his apprentice. Anakin was struggling more than he ever could have. He had lost both Kenobi and Padme within hours of one another, and the struggle he was in was written on his face. The Jedi who had relocated had a lot to unpack if they wanted to maintain the Jedi Order. There was one Jedi, and her name was Natabre Morden. She came to Anakin's side during his turmoil. Though the Sith lost a good number of troops in the Jedi Temple, it wasn't hard to recruit, even if they were evil. The Sith, though, couldn't relax. They had a new enemy, and it was the CIS. Dooku caught wind of the battle at Coruscant, and he was ready to capitalize off the Sith victory. The Sith didn't need to have the numbers in space, but they had the numbers on the ground, and currently the Sith Lords were demolishing pieces of the Jedi Temple to create an opening for the Sith Temple that existed beneath the surface. Sidious wanted to utilize it for the longest time, but it lay hidden under the Jedi Temple. But the Sith enacted on mercy and brought Palpatine down to the surface of Coruscant into the rubble of the Jedi Temple as they were clearing path for the Sith Temple. All by Malgus' doing, Sidious was brought down to the Jedi Temple. He grinned at Palpatine and released him from his shackles. Sidious laughed to himself. The Sith had finally won. But then he heard one of the Sith troopers tell Nihilus that an enemy fleet had arrived over the planet. Palpatine turned and saw Nihilus twist his head as he looked at Sheev and reached out with his hand. He began to drain the life from Palpatine, and with his other hand by his side, he drained a life from all those who were wounded by Yoda's final act. Nihilus killed Sheev and those around him, and then he left the stairs of the Jedi Temple and joined his master down in the Sith Temple that lay below. A massive separatist fleet emerged from hyperspace, guided by the massive cruiser named the Malevolence. There weren't many ships left from the Sith Empire, and they were outnumbered 10-1. The Separatists prepared everything they had for a ground invasion, though it didn't matter. Most of the governmental section of Coruscant was leveled, and populations throughout the city were being massacred in a giant genocide. Brutality of the worst nature. In the underbelly of Coruscant, the civilians were fighting back, but they were initially destroyed. In space, a massive beam came from the surface of Coruscant, cutting through the Malevolence and half of the Separatist fleet. Dooku and Grievous were instantaneously killed. The rest of the fleet began to engage the Sith fleet, while landing craft made its way to the desolate cities of Coruscant. People were being slaughtered, and those caught in between Sith armies and clankers were doomed. The battle waged on for weeks. It was a massive campaign for the Sith, and their endurance kept them the planet of Coruscant. The Sith, though, accomplished what they really wanted, enslavement of the population while genociding the rest of it. Coruscant was completely upended, with millions of people gone with the initial week of combat, and even more so afterwards. The Sith were tightening their grip on Coruscant, while the Separatists retreated and would eventually fall out of power. Nihilus, who operated the weapon that crippled the Separatist invasion fleet, spent more time with some of the other Sith in making sure that the machine would be ready for the Jedi should they return. But they didn't. They were busy trying to secure planets and raise militias. Meanwhile, in a former Kaminoan colony near Ahch-To, the Kaminoans began to retrofit their old technology and recreate the city that they created on Kamino. The Kaminoans weren't just doing this for a cash grab, but they were genuinely afraid of the possibility of dying at the hands of the Sith, and so they doubled their efforts to create clones, though these new batches wouldn't have inhibitor chips. It wasn't that they didn't want to fulfill their original order, but because Tyrannus hadn't been in contact with them for some time, they assumed the worst, especially because of the Sith. The war between the Jedi and Sith would be hard fought. Months would go by without any progression by the Jedi. The Sith didn't know where the clones and Jedi were operated out of. The Jedi had a lot of issues they were facing though, so many younglings and not enough Jedi Masters. Massive battles and skirmishes would occur during this time, but as the Sith began to increase their reign across the galaxy, utilizing the Kuat drive yards and building newer and more powerful models of warships. The remnant of the Republic and their troopers began striking deals across the galaxy for amassing warships for their own campaign. The galaxy was beginning to fall into fear. Even more than that, the remaining government was in fear of what the Sith might do to them. Considering the ruin they had left the Republic in, In this dark time, there were Jedi who changed sides, Jedi who believed that they should serve the evil. The Sith had a grip on the galaxy as they began to ravage through planets. Because the Sith were so spread out, the Jedi and clones were able to make mercy missions to help people within the galaxy. On Ahch-To, Grandmaster Windu was planning out assaults and strategizing with clone commanders. The CIS was nearing complete shutdown. They were failing at every turn. Without leaderships, the droid armies were crumbling under Sith assaults. The citizens of the galaxy were in complete fear. The Jedi seemed to have been massacred, of which they were. They lost thousands of members. The Jedi who survived were mostly Padawans and younglings. The Jedi were training their young. The Jedi missed Yoda, but they needed to be ready. This war would be a long haul, and because the Kaminoans were producing more clones for the galaxy. Though, there was something brewing in the rebuilding Jedi Order. A Jedi, who was by Anakin's side, was growing closer and closer with him as the months passed by. Natabre. And Anakin grew tighter and tighter. They had a deep bond. Anakin didn't know how to properly communicate to anyone how he was feeling. It wasn't just Kenobi, but the death of Padme was ever so painful for him. Natabre were there for Anakin, and her compassion helped him. She was the same age as Anakin. She was a bit shorter than him, with long flowing blonde hair. On Ahch-To, they trained with one another. Both of them were knights. She carried a green lightsaber as well. Anakin and Natabre fought together and trained together. Both of these two Jedi had a loose view on the code, and they bonded over such similarities. Natabre's master died when the temple was burned to the ground by the Sith. Anakin and Natabre were assigned to several missions with one another, and they served with a clone legion together. No grand progress during the war against the Sith would be made for nearly a decade. The war was stiff. Clones were being produced and shipped out to war, while the Sith were able to find people to join their ranks and mass-produce them a fleet. The Republic during this time secured most of the Outer Rim and pieces of the Mid-Rim, which was their only progress in the 10 years since the war had begun. The Jedi, though, realized their own incompetence through securing the Outer Rim territories. They realized that the Outer Rim, which wasn't touched by the Sith Empire, was full of crime. The Outer Rim territories were ruled by slavery, and even with the Sith and Jedi war ravaging through the galaxy, the Jedi were trying their best to serve the citizens of the Outer Rim. The war was dragging on, and the Sith by this time had rebuilt the temple on Coruscant. Fires burned consistently within the city. The Sith had kept their promises to the many different Sith Lords, who were spread out across the galaxy. The Sith Triumvirate were stationed in the core, and outside of them, a couple of the others were located around the Mid-Rim. The Jedi had the Sith where they wanted them. They had amassed a large fleet thanks to Mon Calamari's shipyards, and the Jedi's plan was to strike at the heart of the Sith Empire and claim victory over them. With a small task force, the Jedi prepared the Order's best for an invasion onto the surface of Coruscant. The Sith allowed little travel off-world, and the travel that they did allow had special codes. If the Jedi wanted any chance of surviving, they had to avoid the Sith Fleet to sneak down to the surface. As the Jedi tried to get close to Coruscant, they were intercepted by an interdictor field in the Alderaan sector. Pulled out of hyperspace, they relayed a signal back to the Republic fleet that they were in danger of being captured. This could be a devastating loss for the Republic. Some of the Order's best duelists were present on this ship, including the two lovers, Anakin and Natabre. The communication was sent before the Sith could cut communications, and the shuttle was brought aboard Darth Malgus' flagship stationed in the area. He went down to greet the Jedi who had arrived, but when he got down to the shuttle, it was empty, and several of his warriors had been slain by a lightsaber blade. He was unhappy about this, and so he told the ship to go into high alert. But before the ship could begin to search for the Jedi that had escaped, a massive fleet emerged from hyperspace. Mon Calamari cruisers flanked by Venator-class Star Destroyers made their presence known to the Sith by tearing apart the support ships and battleships. The interdiction field didn't do much to prevent the fleet from arriving because it was set to pull ships from hyperspace. On board the flagship, Mace Windu separated from the group of Jedi so that they may escape. He wanted to be sure that the Sith Lord known as Malgus stayed dead forever. The Jedi found themselves a way to get off the ship, and so they prepared the shuttle. A little bit further away, Malgus was walking down the hallway when he encountered an amethyst-wielding blade, a Jedi. There was only one Force user he ever knew to use this kind of blade. Windu didn't hesitate to face down the legendary Sith Lord. Windu stepped forward and prepared himself for the most important duel since the temple had fallen all those years ago. Malgus and Windu clashed blades, and it was tense. Blades lit the hallway. When one duelist pushed the advantage, the other was able to reciprocate it. Windu played defensively at first, as he was pushed from the corridor into the hangar where the other Jedi were preparing to leave in their shuttle that they had found. The Jedi couldn't help Windu because a swarm of Sith troopers and Sith warriors were running into the hangar, and with that they had to defend themselves. Windu was now in more open area and began to push his advantage. Malgus was tough and strong, but he was unprepared when Mace Windu pushed into his assault, and then Mace created a perfect parry that landed the blow right into Malgus's throat. Windu wasn't hesitant to end the Sith Lord's life, as he drifted around the Sith and struck him down. The Jedi who were fending off the shuttle needed to go. The Sith had begun to fill the hangar bay with troops, and they needed to escape before the Republic's fleet ripped the remainder of both this ship and the Sith fleet apart. From the back of the Sith trooper lines, Master Windu ran towards his friends on the ship. He used his blade to cut down as many as he could, and the shuttle began to take off. Mace had to time this perfectly, or he could be captured or fall into the vacuum of space. Mace leapt, and under heavy fire from the Sith troopers, his left arm was clipped, sending him off course for the ship's entrance. But before Mace could be another Jedi killed by the Sith Scourge, he was pulled by the Force via Plo Koon, who used his lightsaber to block shots from the troopers. As the shuttle escaped, a wing of fighters went to escort the Jedi shuttle back into the flagship's hangar bay. They had to prepare a new strategy. Since they pushed into the deep core, it were possible that Sith legions across the galaxy would be summoned to enact atrocities on the people of Alderaan. The Jedi, though, made sure to take advantage of this defensive situation and station the interdictor mines outside of reach. There was silence on the command deck. The Jedi didn't speak. The Jedi, since the fall of the Order, had become more balanced out, relaying themselves back to the Force itself. The Jedi, in of themselves, became more a part of the living Force. Anakin stood next to Master Windu on the bridge. The two had come full circle in the past 10 years. They had an immense bond, and Anakin, being a master on the Council, was trained Vapad by Windu. They stared into space, talking about all that had transpired. Windu aged severely since the temple fell. He had to take on all the responsibilities of Grand Master, while Shakti helped him as Master of the Order. Windu had to manage a war effort to save the civilians of the galaxy, but he also had to maintain the rubble of the Fallen Order. He held the mantle and made sure to stay at the top of his game, though. Anakin and Windu had an intimate moment on the bridge. Their conversation was immediately ended, though. The plan had worked, sure enough. Two large corresponding fleets arrived out of hyperspace. They didn't expect the Jedi to amass such a large army and fleet. While clone legions across the galaxy were able to crush Sith armies due to superior training, space combat was a different story. The legendary Kuat drive yards were enslaved to produce masterful warships for the Sith cause, and these warships were present here, as Revan's fleet and Bane's fleet prepared for combat, though they realized they required more reinforcements, and in an attempt to flee the zone before combat began, some Gazanti cruisers pulled the interdiction mines out from behind the Sith fleet, and got out of dodge, of course. As the Sith fleet maneuvered to retreat to Coruscant to regroup with the Triumvirate's fleet, their hyperdrives weren't working. The Republic fleet was already anchored in position as they began to open fire on the extremely vulnerable Sith fleet. There wasn't much that they could do but try and turn to fight, with their backs against the walls. Revan and Bane knew that they couldn't be killed in space, but the odds of surviving were looking down on them. They had nowhere to go, and while their warships were standing their ground against the Republic fleet, there was little hope for the Sith Empire to survive. Meanwhile, Anakin, Natabre, and Plo Koon were secretly dispatched off the capital ship. They had a secret mission that had them destined to return to the ruin that had become of Coruscant. Being far enough away from the interdiction field, their small ship escaped the combat. The Jedi had a secret ship that was designed to become invisible and undetectable by radars. The Jedi over Alderaan were destroying the remainder of the Sith's combat vessels. Because they were Jedi, they allowed the Sith Lords a chance to surrender, but with no response from Revan or Bane's ship, both ships were torn apart. The Sith fleet was destroyed, and with it, the Republic secured one of the most impressive victories that had ever achieved in the 10-year war. The people on the surface of Alderaan rejoiced. The Sith had been kind to them this time, but thousands of years before, the Sith torched their cities. But the Jedi had saved them once again, and because the central fleets of the Sith had been destroyed, there was hope to restore the galaxy. And the following days, the Mid-Rim would begin to rise up against the Sith. Minor Republic fleets would be sent to aid one fleet led by Admiral Killian and Master Ahsoka Tano, and her Twi'lek Padawan named Ravana. Jedi that weren't powerful enough to be sent to Coruscant began to besiege the Mid-Rim and conquer territories. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, the 3 Jedi had landed. The city was in rubble. The place was barely recognizable. There was nothing but crime and depression that rang through the streets. The people of Coruscant saw the worst of the war. With the Sith Triumvirate present, the citizens became lunch for the Lord of Hunger and target practice for the clinically insane Lord Sion. The Sith had ravaged the city, and while Traya didn't keep a tight leash on her students, she sat idle in the newly established Sith Temple. She wasn't the leader of the Sith, but she was respected as such, hence why brutes such as Malgus and Bane elected her to remain on Coruscant with her 2 apprentices. While news hadn't reached the Sith on Coruscant about the massive defeat over Alderaan, there was something awry in the Force, a perfect parallel of the chaos the Jedi felt within the Force when the Sith first arrived in the unknown regions a decade before. Anakin was with Plo and Natabre as they snuck through the underbelly trying to find the ancient tunnels that led to the Sith Temple beneath the former Jedi Temple. Plo Koon was the only one with knowledge of where these tunnels were. Anakin and Natabre knew of these, but they didn't know where to find them. Eventually, Plo Koon found it, and he led the 2 Jedi with him. Anakin reached his true potential in the 10 years since the temple had fallen. As he and his beloved followed Plo, they entered the base of the Sith Temple. They knew it lay under the Jedi Temple, but it had grown into the upper parts of the city. At the top was a super weapon that could be used against the Republic fleet if it emerged from hyperspace. Plo told the Jedi to split up. He was an incredible duelist, and he trusted Anakin and Natabre to go to the top of the temple on the opposite side. Plo Koon began to climb the ramps. As he made his way up to the top, he encountered Sith Lord Sion. Sion was a large brute of the Sith. He had an angry look on his face, and he towered over the Jedi Master. Plo didn't fear Sion. Plo was a master duelist, and so he readied himself for combat. As Sion threw insults at Plo, trying to demoralize him, these insults didn't matter to Plo. He moved steadily, as Sion ignited his blade, and the 2 clashed in a blaze on the west side of the temple. Nearing the top of the Sith Temple, Anakin and Natabre faced down the Lord of Hunger. They were right next to the Sith weapon. The weapon fed off the Force, and Nihilus was the one who gave it power. The life force of most of Coruscant's population was held within it. Nihilus came to steal the soul of the Jedi's chosen one, and the one that made him complete. Natabre was powerful with the Force. It was almost like a dyad, but they were more powerful, because Anakin and Natabre had a powerful connection with one another. Nihilus took excitement in the possibilities of taking Force from 2 beings as powerful as these 2, and so he drew his blade. It wasn't often that the Lord of Hunger got to duel, and so he wanted to enjoy the challenge that sat before him. Meanwhile, Plo Koon was pushing his offensive, shoving Sion up the stairs. Sion's arrogance was making him look like a fool now. No matter. As Plo curved his stance to throw Sion off balance, he tried to strike. Plo grabbed Sion's hand and pulled him into the blue blade that Plo was wielding, killing the Sith Lord instantaneously. As Plo turned, he could not only feel it in the Force, but he could see both Anakin and Natabre on the ground, and from their chest, Force energy was being drained into the hands of Nihilus. So much power, and he was drawing on it. Plo yelled out as he darted across the platform to confront the Lord of Hunger, and Nihilus broke concentration to look at the Jedi Master, who was lifting his hands and used Force light, which deafened the powers of the darkness that Nihilus had been using. But because of the Lord of Hunger being so powerful, Plo had to act quickly. Nihilus drew his blade towards Plo, who jumped into action. 3 large strikes from the Jedi Master, and Nihilus's blade fell to the floor. He drew his hands and used Force drain, and his powers returned. Plo knew that if he used Nihilus's power against him, he could free the souls of those who had been killed by him on Coruscant, but of course it meant the ultimate sacrifice. Instead of resisting, Plo welcomed the drain, and gave the light to Nihilus, pushing Nihilus back further and further towards the center of the superweapon. Plo told Anakin and Natabre to get out of the way. Plo engulfed the dark energy that was the Lord of Hunger and pushed him further and further into the weapon, and the light consumed the darkness. Plo's light was more powerful than the depths of Nihilus. Both the wound and the Force and the Keldor's essences combined into which the light that was Plo Koon, was more powerful than that of the darkness that was Nihilus. As Anakin and Natabre ran from the temple, the entire structure began to implode within itself. Darth Treya, who was inside unprepared by the failure of her students, exploded as the temple crumbled on top of her. The dead across Coruscant rose as Anakin sent a signal to Mace Windu that the superweapon was destroyed. Anakin and Natabre lay in each other's arms, looking up as the darkness that covered the sky seemed to dissipate. The war wasn't over, and they had just lost a dear friend, but in this moment, here and now, they felt victorious. Of course they had each other after all. They turned simultaneously as if, even without the Force, they were drawn to each other naturally, and kissed each other. They looked back up and saw the Republic fleet emerge from hyperspace. The Republic fleet prepared for battle. As its fleet emerged from hyperspace, the Sith Empire was on its heels, and the Republic was here to snuff it out. The Jedi began their assault on the Sith, and the space battle was epic. The Mon Calamari ships were impressive feats of engineering, and the Venators were releasing waves of fighters to combat the ships that the Sith had. The warships the Sith had carried little fighters and had little anti-fighter artillery. Wings of Y-Wings and ARC-170s began to target important functions on these warships as they began to crumble under Republic fire. But on the surface, battle was about to begin. Malak and Bastila, the remaining loyalists to the now dead Lord Revan, and the final Sith Lords left in the galaxy, prepared to fight Anakin and Natabre. This would be the test of strength for the lovers as they prepared to end the Sith scourge forever. In space, the Sith warships that remained were preparing to jump to hyperspace, but the interdiction mines that the Republic had captured over Alderaan were ready and deployed. The clones showed no mercy, and without hesitation they blew the final Sith warships out of orbit as their wreckage crumbled above Coruscant. And a great duel began below the wreckage of the Sith Temple. Windu and Shaak Ti knew they had to get down to the surface immediately. They didn't know if there were still Sith alive on the planet, but they wanted to save their 3 Jedi friends. Of course, they didn't know that one of them had sacrificed himself for the Republic, for the galaxy. Anakin rose, and with a defensive stance, both Bastila and Malak knew that he was protecting someone that he loved. They started talking at Anakin as Natabre rose to her battle stance. Anakin and Natabre were like a tornado of duality. They covered each other as they danced around like lovers at a ball. Malak and Bastila were powerful adversaries, but Natabre and Anakin matched each other perfectly. Malak and Bastila could only ever dream of successfully landing a blow. Grabbing each other's hands, Natabre and Anakin swung past one another simultaneously as they struck down the last 2 Sith in the galaxy. A couple moments later, Mace's shuttle was landing. The shuttle doors opened and the 2 Jedi, Anakin and Natabre, jumped inside. The day was won by the Jedi. A report from Master Tano in the Mid-Rim reported that the Sith troopers were surrendering to the clone legions. As millions of freedom fighters across the galaxy began to scourge the Sith troopers, freedom would be restored to the galaxy. The Jedi had won the war. As long as it had been since there was peace, Anakin had brought balance to the Force, and the Jedi were back to restore the balance. The clones were dispatched across the galaxy to rebuild the Republic. The most incredible part is that there was a completely united front to restore the galaxy into one unified force. The Republic was rebuilt, and the Jedi would rebuild their morals and their code, and they would rebuild their temple elsewhere, not on Coruscant. Since they had lost so much, they learned that they needed so much more to keep the balance. A new council spot would be made for the late great Plo Koon. In remembrance of the Jedi Master, a 13th spot was made on the High Council called Master of the Light. The Jedi Master who wielded this showed the most balance in the council, and it would soon be awarded to Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi were doing everything they could. As the galaxy rose from the ashes of what the Sith left behind, the remnants of the Sith and their evil rule anywhere in the galaxy were erased forever, as the galaxy remained in peace. Wow. That was our story, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. This was a really long story. I really spent 2 days working on this. After the other video was finished, I started working on this, and this one was really, really complex, and I'm taking my hat off to myself here, so thank you guys for watching this. I'm very proud of this one. I was talking with people in the Discord, shameless plug-in for the Discord, about actually making this into a mini-series. I was hinting at it, and I was talking about, well, there's a lot of things that happen here, and it could be like a Clone Wars-esque miniseries where there's lots of different missions with lots of different Jedi. There's not really a main protagonist, you're just following different characters as they go on different missions. And I'm just thinking about this because there's 10 years that go on here, and the Jedi are starting from 2 planets, Ahch-To and the colonized planet that the Kaminoans are on, which is out in the Outer Rim. And I think this is a really, really fun theory because there's so much happening in it. There's so many new characters. There's so many possibilities for duels and combat and all this stuff, for Sith victories, for Jedi victories, for clone victories, for Sith Trooper victories. There's so much going on here, and I really, really liked this one. This one was really hard to do because I was telling a story about a much grander scheme than I normally do. Usually I focus on a couple characters, mostly Anakin, and I'm familiar with that, obviously. I don't really I've never really read Legends, and I'm not really familiar with Legends other than a little bit of KOTOR and the Old Republic knowledge that I have available to me. And of course, Wikipedia is always a great tool for these videos, but I really went off of what I knew for this one, and I didn't really use Wikipedia for this one because I really wanted this one to feel unique, and that was the point of this. I didn't want this to be, you know, the Sith return, the Jedi win, the Sith return, the Sith win. I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be a complex story, and I always wanted it to be that. And yeah, I know this one is a light side ending. Whoop-de-doo, I know I did it again. But, I mean, in reality, the Sith won, and light rises to meet the darkness. That is the story of Star Wars at the heart of everything, is that darkness rises and light comes to take it away. And I think the ending of this is reminiscent of what the Jedi would become in the end, and they would realize that at the end of the day they needed to move past their old order and be more balanced in the Force so that they could prevent anything like this happening again. I really like the direction of this. I like the fact that there's so many possibilities in between. There's a 10-year gap, and in that 10 years the Republic secure victories, but they also lose. And that's where the miniseries that I was talking about comes from. I mean, you're talking about from 22 BBY and canon to about 12 BBY and canon. So there's a 10-year gap right there where there's so much possibility, so much ability for things to happen. And for a new character, I've been starting to do this more often, especially with the new Force powers, but Natabre Morden was a character that I wanted to bring to life. I wanted Anakin to have a female companion, a companion, a love interest, and I didn't want to do too much on her because at some point, if we ever do come back to this, if you guys blow this up, and I mean blow this up, I mean make this the biggest video on the channel, I will come back, I'll make this a mini-series, and we might do some animation for it in the future. But I wanted Anakin to have a love interest, and I wanted her to be a powerful Jedi that was around the same age as him, and have a lot of relation to him. And I really felt that deep connection between them in the story. And though it was only touched upon a little bit because this isn't the story of Anakin, I didn't want to focus on it. Of course, a mini-series, I could do a whole love arc. I could do 3 episodes that are love arcs, 20 minutes to 30-minute long episodes, stuff like that, where we actually go into depth with these characters and the story that sits at the heart of this. And at the heart of this, it's a massive story. I mean, I have to say, George Lucas was a large inspiration for this, and I mean, of course he's an inspiration. I mean, he created Star Wars, but I mean, a large inspiration for this story because I'm taking the beginning, the most important part, which is the beginning, and the most important part, which is the ending, which is Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Attack of the Clones is the beginning, which in this story is the attack of the Sith coming to Coruscant, them winning, and then there's a time gap. There's a time gap between this and the next part, which the next part is technically my Revenge of the Sith, where at the end I'm having my showdown between good and evil. Who's gonna win? You don't really know, and that's the end of it. But in between, I leave all that space for you. I leave you room to interpret what happens there. Does Anakin get a scar again? Does he lose another arm? Does he lose something else? Does he keep Natabre? I mean, Natabre has to live because she's at the end, but I mean, there's so many opportunities, and that's what I'm really excited about with this, is that the opportunities to take this story further are definitely available. So if you guys like this one, please tell me down below. I really, really worked hard on this one. This is one of my favorite stories just because of how complex it is, because of how much time I spent on it, because of how much I really put into the story at heart here, and it's almost an hour long, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I mean, this is a single episode that is almost the same length as a 4-part series that I did, and I'm really proud of that because I put that effort in the 2 days. So Please blow this video up, make this video huge. Tell me what you guys think of it. Tell me what you thought of the concept of it. Do you guys like it? Do you guys not like it? What do you think about the concept? I'll respond to constructive criticism, but if you just aren't constructive, then I really don't care. It doesn't really affect my ego. I don't really have one, so if you feel that way, then go ahead, be my guest. I don't really care. I'm telling stories for everyone, not just you. So everyone, I hope you guys enjoy this. I love you all. Spread the love, and always, my friends, may the Force be with you.